Title: I went camping with my wife and her friends. After a short walk with my 10-year-old son, everything was gone. The people, the tents, the food, the cars, no cell service, just a note on the table: this is for the best. Trust me, they left us to die in the forest. 10 days later, they regretted it. Chapter 1. The Betrayal in the Woods. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. My son and I had only gone for a short walk down the trail. 10, maybe 15 minutes. When we returned to camp, everything was gone. The tents, the food, the cars, even the laughter of the people we came with. All that remained was a flimsy folding table. On it sat a single sheet of paper, weighed down by a rock. My son picked it up with trembling hands. His voice cracked as he read aloud: "This is for the best. Trust me." It was my wife's handwriting. I looked around, the sinking realization clawing at my chest. They hadn't gotten lost. They hadn't gone for help. They had left us. No phone service, no supplies, just a 10-year-old boy and his father, abandoned deep in the wilderness. My son's wide eyes met mine. "Dad, are we going to die out here?" I forced a calm I didn't feel, placing a hand on his shoulder. "No, son, we're going to survive. And when we get out of here, they're going to regret this." Chapter 2. 10 Days in the Wild. The first night was the hardest. My son curled up beside me, under the open sky, shivering, not only from the chill, but from fear. I had no tent, no stove, no food, just my jacket, a half-empty water bottle, and the determination to keep him alive. Day 1 to 3. Survival instincts. We built a lean-to from branches and leaves. I showed him how to collect rainwater using my shirt and a hollowed log. When his stomach growled, I taught him how to identify safe berries and set simple snares with strips of shoelaces. At night, when coyotes howled in the distance, I wrapped my arms around him and whispered stories of how his grandfather had taught me the same skills when I was a boy. It steadied him and me. Day 4 to 6, the breaking point. By the 4th day, exhaustion gnawed at us. My son's lips were cracked, his legs weak. He asked again if we were going to die. I looked into his eyes so much like mine, and forced a smile. "We're not going to die. We're going to show them who we are." It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about proving that the people who abandoned us couldn't break us. On the 6th day, we found a stream. We drank until our stomachs hurt, and I silently thanked the heavens. Day 7 to 10, the return strength returned. I fashioned crude walking sticks, and we followed the stream downhill, until on the 10th day we stumbled onto a dirt road. A park ranger's truck rounded the bend. His eyes went wide when he saw us, ragged and filthy but alive. "My God, people have been searching for you for over a week. Your wife said you wandered off and never came back." I exchanged a look with my son. His little jaw clenched, and for the first time, I saw anger in his eyes. "She lied," he whispered, and I nodded, because now it wasn't just survival. It was war. Chapter 3. Homecoming. When we stepped out of the ranger's truck into town, people gasped, cameras snapped. To everyone else we were a miracle, a father and son who had defied death in the wild. But to me, it was the first step back into a battlefield. The story they told at the police station. Officers explained what my wife and her friends had said. They wandered off and never came back. We looked, but they must have gotten lost. They painted themselves as worried, helpless bystanders. Some even tearfully volunteered to assist in search efforts, when in reality they had left us to starve. But their story had cracks. Search records showed they hadn't once gone into the forest after day 1. No missing person flyers. No calls to local hospitals. Nothing. The chief leaned across the desk. "We're already suspicious. People don't just abandon a campsite like that." I said nothing, just rested a hand on my son's shoulder. This wasn't the time to explode. Revenge required patience. The children's loyalty. That night, my daughter rushed into my arms crying, "Dad, I knew she was lying. She told everyone you ran away." But I didn't believe her. My son, bruised from 10 days in the wild, whispered, "She left us to die, and I'll never forgive her." In that moment, I realized something. My revenge wasn't just for me, it was for them too. They needed to see justice done. The first move. The next morning, I contacted my lawyer. Together, we gathered every shred of evidence. The note left on the table, testimony from the ranger and police about their lack of search effort, medical reports showing my son's dehydration and malnourishment, bank records showing their girls' trip expenses while we were missing. We didn't go to them. We didn't argue. We built a case so strong it would crush them under its weight. And when the time came, we'd deliver it in public, the same way they'd abandoned us. Chapter 4. The reckoning begins. The storm broke faster than I expected. Once the police pieced together the truth, the note, the Ressa's testimony, the missing search efforts, they moved in. What my wife and her friends thought was a clever escape plan now looked very different. Attempted murder, by abandonment. The police investigation detectives questioned each of them separately. My wife stuck to her story. He wandered off. We tried to find him, but the cracks were wide. Bank statements showed spa visits and restaurant bills, dated during the search period. Photos of them on social media laughing over cocktails, while my son and I were fighting dehydration sealed the coffin. The note she left behind was entered into evidence, her own handwriting betraying her. The police chief told me privately, she didn't just make a mistake, she orchestrated this. The court of public opinion news spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed, father and son abandoned in wilderness, survived 10 days against odds. Wife and friends face criminal charges after chilling note surfaces. People were furious. Social media turned them into villains overnight. My wife's friends, once smug and self-righteous, were rounded by reporters outside their homes. One by one, their employers distanced themselves public. The legal counter-strike. My lawyer filed for full custody of my children, citing endangerment and neglect. With the evidence in hand, the judge didn't hesitate. My wife's custody rights were stripped immediately. Financially, I filed civil suits for damages, medical bills, emotional distress, and reputational harm. Their bank accounts froze under court order. The spa days and cocktails were over. Now they were paying lawyers, just to keep themselves out of prison. The emotional blow. The hardest moment came in court, when my son stood up, his small voice trembling, but firm. She left us to die. I don't want to live with her ever again. Gasps filled the room. My wife broke down in sobs, but no one moved to comfort her. Her friends wouldn't meet her eye. The same people who had laughed when they drove away from camp now sat silently, realizing they'd destroyed their own lives. Chapter 5. The final justice. The courtroom became the place where everything came full circle. The sentence. My wife and her friends, once smug enough to leave me and my son in the forest to die, now stood trembling in handcuffs. The prosecutor spared no words. This wasn't negligence. This was abandonment, premeditated and deliberate. The note, the bank records, the Ressa's testimony, my son's words. It was airtight. The judge's gavel came down guilty. They each received prison sentences for reckless endangerment and attempted manslaughter. No suspended terms, no lenience. The social collapse reporters swarmed outside the courthouse. Once my wife loved flashing cameras, basking in admiration. Now every flash burned her image deeper into infamy. Her friends were ostracized. Employers cut ties. Families disowned them. And even distant relatives refused to answer their calls. They weren't just disgraced. They were radioactive. The emotional closure, the real moment of justice came quietly. After the sentencing, my son tugged on my sleeve. His voice was soft but steady. Dad, we survived together. I pulled him close. Tears burned my eyes, not from pain, but from pride. He had walked through hell with me, and come out stronger. The poetic ending. Months later, as I spoke at a wilderness survival fundraiser, telling our story not as tragedy, but as triumph, I noticed faces in the crowd nodding, clapping, admiring, and I realized the same people who once tried to erase me had given me the greatest gift. A legacy built not on their approval, but on resilience, strength, and truth. They thought they'd left us to die. Instead, they buried themselves, and my son and I walked out of the woods, stronger, united, and free. Epilogue. Years later, her life behind bars. My wife never adapted to prison life. Once adored at brunches and parties, she became just another inmate number. Her friends, the ones who plotted with her, quickly turned on each other, each trying to cut a better plea deal. Betrayal ate them alive from the inside, just as they once tried to eat me and my son alive by leaving us behind. When I saw her name in a local paper years later, inmate denied early release for lack of remorse, I didn't feel anger anymore, just pity. Our life rebuilt. My son grew into a man who carried scars, but also strength. Those 10 days had hardened him, but they had also bonded us in a way nothing could break. He became a leader in his own right, strong, resilient, and loyal. Together, we told our story, first in schools, then in survival programs, and finally at national conferences. We weren't victims anymore. We were proof of endurance, poetic justice. One evening after finishing a keynote speech at a fundraiser, my son leaned over and whispered with a small smile, "Dad, remember the note. This is for the best. Trust me." I nodded. He chuckled. Turns out she was right. It really was for the best. The audience stood to applaud us, and I realized the full truth. They had left us in the forest to die, but by doing so they had killed only themselves. And out of that wilderness, my son and I emerged, not just alive, but unstoppable. Was this revenge perfectly justified? Tell us what you think about this story in the comments below. Like the story. If you think this story is justified, share it with someone who needs this energy, and subscribe to Lauren's Story for more jaw-dropping tales of betrayal and justice, because here, every lie has its reckoning, and every betrayal finds its shadow.